How can someone now start reframing their minds to asking more powerful questions?
Right. So first off, I've always found you get better at things in life if you teach it. So if I teach something during your podcast and someone wants to get better at it, what they should do is I learned this real neat thing from this random British guy on Celeste's podcast, and then they teach it to someone else. They'll become better at it. Not role playing, not practicing, because you have to wait a long time to actually face those scenarios. First off, second off is reframing a question. Just because you ask a question doesn't mean you sometimes don't have to ask a question more clarity, because you might not get the answer that you're looking for, or like you have to go back in and say something of that nature. The only thing in sales that you can't be is desperate. Everything else goes. You can stutter, stumble, it's human. All right. You just have to garner understanding from the person in front of you. Is it okay to be human? All right. And if someone says no to you, you want to run away from that person. Things to help people out in the reframe. Instead of going in with the whole let me start by telling you all these things, you ask a question: what is one thing that you value more than anything when choosing or deciding to work with?
Hello, amigos. It's Celeste Leon, and welcome back to the Light to Success podcast, a place where we can discuss how to strengthen our mindset, increase our confidence, and maintain a high level of motivation to reach the next level of success in our lives. So, let's get started.
Welcome back, friends, to the Light to Success podcast. I'm really excited to have today the Wizard of Communication, Jamie Miller. I met Jamie a couple of months ago at Impact Effect 2023 on a really amazing motivational conference in Nashville, Tennessee, where he was one of the keynote speakers. And he talked about all things conscious communication, and it was just you were one of my favorite speakers, Jamie. I think you got on stage, you were so comfortable, you were ready to just have a conversation, and you shared so many amazing nuggets. You talked about how to reframe conversations through asking better questions. You talked about how to be more memorable, how to be more impactful with what you say, because oftentimes people like to talk too much, right? But how can you be more concise? And in order to obtain that desired outcome that we want through that art of conscious communication. So I really am excited to get into an awesome conversation about this today, and also a little bit more background on you. I know you've spoken and taught at a global scale now. Some of his clients include big entities such as Edward Jones and Caldwell Banker. He's a national trainer at this point, and he has helped many, many companies improve their communication to sell and improve their businesses. So, thank you, Jamie, for being here today.
My pleasure. I'm very happy to be here. Love podcasts, and the Nashville event. Nashville's a great place. You live there now. It's my favorite restaurant in the country is there. So anytime I get invited,
Which one?
Cane Prime.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So
I gotta
I
try
kind
it.
of I kind of told Jim when he was arranging the budget for the speaker fees. I said, "You've got one up on me." He goes, "What's that?" I said, "My favorite restaurant in the country is there." So as long as I said I said I'll be a bit more budget friendly for you based on the fact you've got one up on me on that. But
Oh, I
yeah.
love it. I gotta try it. But, well, Jamie, I remember you started your speech once you got on stage. I believe you asked the audience a few questions, or you shared some kind of message, and then you asked us a question about something you had said. And I believe no one could answer what you were asking, even though you had already mentioned it. And you made a point about how people actually don't listen to everything that people say, and they're very selective. Can you explain a little bit about what message you were trying to convey there?
Right. So you said in some of the introduction of me, like people overshare, people talk too much. A lot of people in the world have learnt the notion you can literally talk yourself out of a sale. Is supposedly the terminology that most people are familiar with. So if someone is starting a dialogue with, let me start by telling you something, who's doing all the talking? not the client, because you're like, let me start by telling you about myself and all the reasons you should go with. So I asked the question of the audience. I'm like, hey, before I start sharing, all this communication advice with you, what benefits do you come up with to be better in the area of communication? And the audience answers me. And then after I've shared, had the audience answer that question, I turn around and say, hey, let's say I can teach you a one-off question you can ask people for your business, and people start selling themselves on you and you haven't told them anything, who would like to learn that question? And I know in my mind, I've already asked it, but no one ever actually retains the information, as an example. And then the other instance is the words we use. I'll give you an example. My biggest client, you mentioned Edward Jones. That came from a young man knocking on my front door, and he said the words, excuse me, I'm not here to sell you something. Now, everyone in the world, your audience, when they listen into this, if a person turns around to them and says, I'm not here to sell you something, and I ask them, what are you hearing the person saying? They're like, you're here to sell me something, right? So it's like if someone ever says to you, Celeste, I hope I'm not being an inconvenience. You in your head, they've just said, I hope I'm not being an inconvenience. You in your mind now processing, well, you weren't being one, but now that you mention that word,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're being an inconvenience. So there is what's called in psychology, there's negative connotations and positive connotations. All right. And most people aren't aware. Like if someone says, I need to talk to my wife first, an amateur would quickly say, so you just don't want to upset your wife. Well, now they're thinking of their wife upset. If you said you just want to make sure your wife is happy, it's just a subtle change. And
Yes.
and that's what occurs. That's what changes that outcome we were talking about. If people just went into an interaction with an outcome in mind, more clarity around it, they would stay away from asking some of the questions that they ask or saying some of the words that they say.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense too, because even when I think about positives affirmation, for instance, something I talk about is you shouldn't say like I am not ugly. You need to say I am beautiful, because your mind, even though you're saying the same thing, right? But you're not, because your mind is going to capture that other word and it's going to internalize it, right?
Well, let's double down here. You're not saying the same thing. You said you're saying the
Right.
same thing.
It's not
You're not.
right.
You're absolutely. I'll give you an example. Like if you ask someone why would you do something, it's completely different than asking why wouldn't you do something. For those of you who are listeners into this and you've got kids and your kids do something naughty, right? Every parent on the planet is, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? I would never ask that question because you don't want the answer to that. That's not going to make you feel better. If you ask your kids, why shouldn't you have done that? You're going to get a completely different answer, a completely different outcome. All right. And just the word not, you said, I am not ugly. Right. We agree. We shouldn't be saying that. The truth of the matter is, anytime you say you're not something, I'm not here to sell you. You're here to sell me. This is not get rich quick. This is get rich quick. Right? Whenever you say the word not, I could tell your audience right now, absolutely under no circumstances, do not, whatever you do not think of a pink elephant. Don't do it. And your audience is going to start picturing a pink elephant in their mind, even though we're saying do not, because we don't listen. We're not good as listeners. The whole world, and I'll put myself in that bracket too. I get paid to communicate and help people communicate better, and I will put myself in the bracket of not being the best listener. In sales, in my professional life, great at listening because I'm just going to ask someone, what reasons would you come up with to have me in your life, and then I'm just going to listen. But in emotionally charged situations, girlfriends, ex-wives, kids, people that are close. None of us in the world are good listeners. We cut people off before they finish their point.
Absolutely.
So as a good lesson, when I'm more aligned and conscious, I'll turn around to my girlfriend and be like, "Hey, honey, is it okay if I share something with you? All right, that's the golden rule. Get permission. Will you let me get to the end of my thought before you say something? That way, all right." And the second I do that, I've now set up success for that conversation. All right, just as an example, like of how
Yeah.
you can change your conversation, the outcome by doing plays like that.
I love that. I love that. And being so intentional from the beginning of what you want from that conversation. It's such a great starter. And I love the quick example you give regarding children, right? Like, why would you do that versus why shouldn't you have done that? Can you dive into a little bit more about that? Because I think most people would say, why would you do that, right? Or don't do that, or why is that so powerful and more effective with children?
So look, I love it when my clients tell me, Jamie, I've got a better relationship with my kids, or I've got grandparents where they're like, I got my kid to speak to me and not be on their device because of advice you gave me. All right. And I'll give you an analogy like food. All right. A parent wants to feed their kid healthy vegetables. Right. It's the famous and they ask the two worst questions, Celeste. So they'll go, how do you know you don't like it? Have you ever tried it? And the answers, have you ever tried it? No. How do you know you don't like it? I just know. You're no closer to
It
the
doesn't
kids.
look good. It's the
It's
right or
it's
whatever it
not
is.
it's not your outcome to get them to eat food, the healthy food, not helpful. If you go in with a question, multiple choice, hey, do you think mummy or daddy feed you healthy because I do care about you or I don't care about you? And the kid is going to go, because you care. So immediately I've got layered, because you care. Okay, well, then what benefit would you come up with then for trying the broccoli? And your kid might say, I don't know. And you're like, well, look, I believe in elementary school you learned something about eating different colored foods. Do you remember any of the benefits of eating a green food? And the kid might say, no, I don't remember. Then I know my kids won't listen to me, but they will listen to Alexa. So I'll go, hey, Alexa, what are the benefits of eating greens, broccoli? And Alexa will go off on this tangent and something about the brain and what have you. And then I'll say to my kids, did any of one of those things stick out to you? And my kids both be like, the thing about the brain, Dad. I'm like, why is that? Now I'm getting them telling me why they want a good brain. Then I can ask the question, so when it comes to broccoli, what are your thoughts now? And they'll say, I should probably at least try it. And now I say, I agree with you. So I'm going into a conversation with them with the outcome where I say, I agree with you before we get started. Meaning you make it the other person's idea. All right. So parents, to answer your question, they have to think about what is the outcome I want to take place from this conversation. And I don't want to have to be like, I told you so. It's more, hey, what benefits do you get from doing this? And let the kids come up with the answers that you're wanting. And if you say, why shouldn't you have done that? You're going to see your kids' eyes go in their head. They're going to be thinking, then they start sharing why they shouldn't have done something. And as a parent, you're going to be like, my kid has a better understanding of this
Mm,
situation. There's so many. I mean, like, look, those are just a couple of examples for you, Celeste. It could be how do you get your kid off of a device? It's all very
yeah.
it's simple. It's the same thing.
But I think my biggest takeaway is that you made it to be their choice as you reframe that perspective rather than eat it because I'm telling you so and I'm your
Yeah,
parent,
if you
right?
want to be big and strong, if you want to be like they're all amateur plays in my head because you're not finding out what the benefits are that the kid sees in their mind to do it, and understanding that they'll listen to Siri or Alexa more than they will you. It are tools that we have at our disposal. All right, that help us. You know, it's not it's again, I like the idea that my concepts I teach are not rocket science. None of your audience needs to develop a British accent or say there's nothing scripted word for word. They have to get more conscious in their thought process before they enter into an interaction, and most people don't know how to do that. In sales, if you're selling a service and someone says, I think you're expensive, most amateurs will turn around and ask the worst question. They'll say, well, why do you think I'm expensive? And they don't realize they've now given a person the ability to justify something that doesn't help you. All right. You said Coldwell Banker. I'm actually in a Coldwell Banker office right now at a brokerage that I coach, all right, on many areas. And sellers in real estate, if you're a realtor watching this, I don't know if you have realtors watching this, but a seller might say to a realtor, I think my house is worth X amount. And every realtor on the planet will ask, how do you come up with your price point? And that's a terrible question because you're now giving someone who's not the expert an ability to justify something to you. All right. Very subtly, you can say, hey, look, I can see where maybe that might be a thought this time. There's something I've not shared around your home yet. Is it okay if I share something with you? They say yes. And then you throw out quickly, I pride myself on being professional. Would you believe I might have done this a number of times? The second the seller goes in their head, I believe they're a professional. I believe they've done it a number of times. They're now in their head being like, I should probably listen to this person. What I didn't do is shoot from the hip and say, why do you think your house is worth that? And letting them have a conversation with me, justifying something that's going to make my life a lot more difficult.
Mm.
Just an example for
Yep.
people. Everyone shoots from the hip, basically, Celeste. People do not think before they ask the question. And then they wonder why the outcome is not what they want it to be.
Yeah, no, that's super, super powerful. And it's about strategically navigating the conversation where you want it to be, right?
As
And
long
that's
I
why it's
would
an
always
art, right? Not a science,
I
too.
would I would like to add, I feel like your audience should know you've got to do things with ethics, integrity, good morals. You don't make someone do something they don't want to do. But if they want to do something, all you're doing is asking what is of benefit for them to do what it is. All right? Whereas like in realtors, because I'm here, like no realtor should be holding a gun to a person's head saying you need to buy or sell a house. Just in the same way I would never tell someone they need a communication coach. Or I could easily ask at this point, hey viewers, like what benefits would you get having me in your life coaching you in communication? Leave it at that and let them start answering stuff to their scenario. Here's a lesson for your audience. There's what's called group psychology. No one likes to be a sucker. I've just shared with you, I'm at my client's office. That's sharing, I've got clients. You've already shared with the audience. I've got Edward Jones, a banker, and a whole load of different clients. I've got Kaylee Bishop, who was a musician, who was at the event that you were at, who came on board as a client as a result of the talk, for example. People don't want to feel like suckers, Celeste. So any entrepreneurs who are watching this, if they throw out to potential clients, hey, I've got people that trust me in this regard for whatever it is they do, they're now planting a subliminal seed in someone's head that they're not using they're saying my clients have said, all right, or I've got clients in this regard. All you're doing is subliminally planting a seed that you have people who pay you, right? And as a result of doing that, that person now won't feel like a sucker for paying you. There's all such simple little seeds in the psychology and what you can be saying in order to achieve more likely an outcome that you want. So hopefully
Yes,
that.
yes, that's so, so, so key. And when you're asking these questions, what tips would you have on how to reframe those? Because I really like when I hear the examples that you're giving me, you're always giving the other person power. And more often than not, they're very open ended questions. So if someone's listening and they usually have been doing the latter, right? Here's my sales pitch, here's what I bring to the table, rather than like letting the client lead that conversation, or perhaps it's a personal relationship, right? Because we use communication for absolutely everything. How can someone now start reframing their minds to asking more powerful questions?
Right. So first off, I've always found you get better at things in life if you teach it. So if I teach something during your podcast and someone wants to get better at it, what they should do is I learned this real neat thing from this random British guy on Celeste's podcast, and then they teach it to someone else, they'll become better at it. Not role playing, not practicing, because you have to wait a long time to actually face those scenarios, first off. Second off is reframing a question. Just because you ask a question doesn't mean you sometimes don't have to ask the question more clarity, because you might not get the answer that you're looking for, or like you have to go back in and say something of that nature. The only thing in sales that you can't be is desperate. Everything else goes. You can stutter, stumble, it's human. All right. You just have to garner understanding from the person in front of you. Is it okay to be human? All right. And if someone says no to you, you want to run away from that person. Things to help people out in the reframe. Instead of going in with the whole let me start by telling you all these things, you ask a question: what is one thing that you value more than anything when choosing or deciding to work with X person?
Mm.
Right. So if you say, what is one thing that you'd have to hear from me, Jamie, to want to come on my podcast? Do you want, like, I might say, I'd really love it, Celeste, if you don't send me a list of questions beforehand, because I actually prefer it being organic, all right, in conversation. You've now asked what is one thing that I would want to see from being on a podcast. And then I tell you, and you'd be like, huh, interesting. Then you can double down and get to it. Why is that something that is important to you, Jamie? I'll be like, well, Celeste, it's really important to me because I love to come across really authentic. And I find that it's like always best to be put on the spot, kind of like a challenge. And you're nodding head yes, meaning, oh, I like where you're going with this. Jamie, I can 100% deliver on that. And I can make it very organic for you where you won't know what's questions coming. If I can prove that's the case, would you indeed want to come on my podcast? Yes. Right, but all you did was find out what's of interest to me, what's of benefit to me to come on. What am I looking for? Your audience doesn't matter what they do for a living. If they ask their client, what is one thing? What's going to happen is they're going to bring on more clients in one meeting. The brain can't process several things. So when people are asking, what are a few things you'd want to see? It's like way to make the sales process way longer, for example. Is
Yeah.
that helpful? Like, was that what you were looking for from
Yes,
a
yes,
kind of
yes.
reframe? Okay.
I really like that. And it's also very focused on purpose and why and alignment. Because I was having a conversation with a colleague like a week ago, and we were also talking about how a lot of companies, right, start with a pitch, and it's all me, 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 me. I've helped thousands of clients. I've done this, which is great, right? They do give their credibility. But how about you start with why or your purpose, or just navigate the conversation with the client regarding a more, rather than this is what we do, on why this is important to you, client, to me, and how we can be a better fit, and asking the client those questions first, and letting our purpose drive us, and then talking about that. What are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts are, if we're selling someone, we should be irrelevant. I will ask my clients in the first meeting, what do you know about me? And they're like, I don't. I mean, what? You've just told me, you just give me thousands of dollars and you know nothing about me. And they're like, no. I'm like, there's a really major lesson in that. Do you remember when I gave a talk, I said, like, how many of you have ever experienced a speaker where for the first 15, 20 minutes, the speaker's all I, me, like, this is all my experience, this is why you should listen to me. And then you're looking at your watch being like, when am I going to learn something? All
Yes.
right. I don't make it the me show. I remove all the ego, and I understand the true notion. If we're selling somebody, we are irrelevant. I'll give you guys an analogy. You watch a movie and you see the scene where the woman's at the bar and she's in tears, and there's a random guy sat next to her, and he goes, "What's going on?" And this woman just goes off on a complete tangent. Didn't even get to a why question. You don't even have to. You can just go, "What's going on?" The woman talks for ages. All of a sudden, she goes to her friend. She goes, "I met the most amazing man on the planet." All right, and
That's
the friends
right.
go, "What do you know about him?" And she knows nothing about him. All he did was ask her a question, and he listened. All your audience, if they ask people questions, get them talking about themselves, I promise you they'll bring on more business, because it's not the me, it's the them. And
Yeah.
that is what will separate them from everyone. Look, I will delve into a why question, and I'll make it for those listeners who've got kids, for instance, just an example, because I use what,
Mhm.
why, how. I used what, why, how with you a second ago. What is one thing you'd want to see on a podcast? I'd want to see this. Why is that? That's why. How would that feel if I can deliver on it, Jamie? Amazing. Watch this. Ruby, my daughter. Ruby, is it a really good thing or a really bad thing to be on your device too much? She'll say, it's bad. I'm like, why? She'll go, the why. I'll end up with no friends, like a hermit, all by myself in a room with no social life. I'm like, oh, Ruby, that sounds terrible. How would you feel if that was your life? Awful, Dad. Okay, so when it comes to your device, what are your thoughts? I should be on it a lot less. And on that, I agree with you. Now, that doesn't stop, but that's technically using the same verbiage, what, why, how. It doesn't matter if I'm a realtor. What one characteristic do you want when choosing to work with a realtor? Communication. Why? Oh, because the last person we worked with, their communication was terrible. How would it feel if I could deliver on that? Amazing. It transcends any conversations less. But what it doesn't do is me, 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 me. It's what are you looking for? All right. And getting them doing all the talking. And it's all subliminal. Right. The more talking they do, the more that you're showing you care in their eyes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. And okay, I love that. That was really, really helpful. I love the reframe, and I love how you put the questions in order in that way. And then something else that comes to my mind, Jamie, that I wanted to ask you is, so there's a lot of people, right? And more, let's get to a little bit more intimate relationships now rather than, oh, I mean, it could all be part of everything. But for instance, a lot of times people want to be heard, right? So right now we've been asking about questions. So it's really about us understanding the other person and making them feel understood and heard. But what about when you are the one that wants to be heard? And perhaps you're in a relationship and you're speaking, you want to be heard. And I think that's something, for instance, when I speak to friends, I speak to different people, they come to me and ask me for advice. Celeste, how do you manage these complex situations and make sure that someone is hearing you properly? Because what happens? Perhaps people speak and they feel attacked. So boom, they no longer want to listen, right? They're speaking and they start using certain words that are just mean. Boom, you're gonna push someone away, right?
Right.
So in being heard, I think there's also an art of how to go about it. So somebody else gives you that space. So we are here talking about how to give other people space to express themselves. But what about when you want that opportunity? What are your thoughts about that?
Right. Okay. So I can be raw with this. So look, the first thing, the golden rule of communication, I call it, is ask for permission. If you want someone to listen to you, right, just ask simple words. Hey, is it okay if I share something with you? If my girlfriend's doing something I don't like, I'm going to start my conversation with the words, is it okay if I share something with you? All right. She knows what I do for a living, so she knows where I'm going with this. All right. But then I would say the next step, would you let me finish my thought and get to the very end? Because otherwise, here's what happens. If you don't do that, the other person, we all suffer from ADHD. So whilst we're speaking, the other person either wants to cut in or their head's going different places. So if you merely just say, will you let me get to the end of my thought? All right. Before you say anything. All right. And that gives you ability to get your point across. And then there's a third thing. This is the biggest part of it. You talked about understanding. The one way that you can garner understanding requires 4 words. You don't have to say it with British accent. You don't even have to say the same 4 words. But I use these words. If you were me. If you want someone to buy into where you're coming from and get understanding, you've got to use the words, if you were me. And with my ex-wife, if I may share it really raw, all right, on this podcast for you, I learned this from my ex-wife. Sometimes, very rare as a man are we ever in the right. It's once in a blue moon, all right? But when my ex-wife wasn't very good at saying the word sorry, all right? So there were times where she would do something wrong. If I went to her with not attacking, but more like, I cannot believe that you did X, she'd never say sorry to that approach, Celeste. But when I went back to her, I'm like, you know what? I thought about it. If I would have done the same thing, you would have been pretty furious. She goes, do you know what? When you put it that way, you're right. I'm sorry. So as a result of that, Celeste, the words, if you were me, were born. Like, I can use it in any setting. Like, let's say I wanted the audience to reach out to me. Hey guys, if you were me and a lovely person called Celeste invited you to be on her podcast because she saw you speak in Nashville, would you be wanting to leave everyone with a positive impact and feeling like, and reaching out to Celeste and saying, Celeste, thank you so much for having Jamie on there. Is that what you guys would want to achieve? Now notice, not at one point did I say I want. I said, if you were me, would you want? And mere fact of doing that, Celeste, is they don't feel sold. Why? Because they would do the same exact thing. They want the same exact things. just using if you were me. So for the intimate scenarios, Celeste, just put them in your shoes. Hey, if you were in my head and you were going to a party with someone, would you be wanting this? Do you know, in relationship, it's not about the person's always going to live up to the actions. It's about you being able to sleep at night. So if I went on a date, if someone, one of your clients goes on a date with someone, if a girl that you know goes on a date with someone and they start off on this tangent, these are my red flags. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. I hate being ghosted. I hate like these things. Very direct. All right. I. Hey, let me just what's your thoughts on being ghosted? Is that something that's really fun or is it something you don't like? Do you see now they're saying, oh, I don't like it. Okay, so can we make sure we don't do that to each other? Can we at least honor that part? Now that guy could still ghost her, but she can go to sleep at night being like, I asked him, he said he didn't like it, he did it. Oh well. But if you say I don't like it and then they do it, they didn't take any ownership of it.
Yes, that's so true. I
Do
love
you
that.
see the
Yeah.
difference? So if you want to get that more understanding in no matter intimate situations or what have you, either put them in your shoes if you were me, or ask them a question. Right? And multiple choice questions, by the way, multiple choice is one of the best ways out there, bar none, to steer a conversation. All right. Am I an alien from some far off planet to think this, or am I firmly on Earth to think this? And if they say, "Oh no, they're firmly on Earth," we have more of an understanding. Does that help?
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
time that we have?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And also, it sets the tone. I like that I think to me, it's also very important to, when, especially if it's like something meaningful, it's a meaningful conversation, you really want to take the time. You really want to slow things down and make people be present. That's such a great way, right? Because you're asking them to be in agreement with you. Hey, we're going to do this together now. Let's be in it. And it also, I love how again and again and again, you keep saying how it's not about, whenever we're like, I want this, like that's not necessarily the approach that we need to take. It's more about, right, like involving that other person, sharing that perspective and allowing them to put themselves in your shoes, right, in order to come to a shared agreement, or at least for the person to be more open-minded to what you have to say.
I'm
Correct?
gonna. Yes, absolutely. You're getting this.
Okay.
There are some other caveats where obviously we've only got so much time during the podcast, but there's the notion as well of praise. All right. Some people, the five love languages. One of those is words
Yeah.
of affirmation. Words of affirmation. All right. I'm going to let all your audience into a secret. Whether someone's love language they like to receive or words of affirmation or not, everyone in the world loves praise. We actually like praise more than we do money. All right. Meaning, whenever you give someone a genuine compliment, and I stress the word genuine compliment, it hits home. So let's say you get someone to a place and you're in a relationship with them. If you can give them genuine praise to make those conversations easier going forward, if they keep feeling like respected from that praise, they're always going to be more wanting to come from a place of seeking to understand where you're coming from because you're praising them as an individual. For the professional, for any of your audience that wants to sell the most wealthiest people on the planet or people who have achieved a lot of success, praise them in the first sentence. Be like, look, well done on achieving the success that you've achieved. And rather than saying to that person, I'm not here to sell you, because the second you say, I'm not here to sell you to someone who's achieved a lot of success, they know exactly, they don't achieve success without knowing what you're doing. So my game plan is to teach someone, go into that meeting with someone successful. If I'm going to try and sell Jim Morris, who puts on an event like the way he does, and I'm going to be like, Jim, seriously, well done. Well done. You put on a massive event. You had the most successful people there. Look, just so you know, I'm 100%, I'm going to look to win your business right now. 100%, not 99. And I'm going to ask you questions. And and you being you're going to know why I'm about to ask you these questions. All right, because you've achieved a success. can we do each other one favor here today? What's that? Can we just be genuine in our responses so that we can both sleep tonight? Is that fair? Fair. And then I'll shake his hand on it. At the end of that conversation, Celeste, here's what he's going to say to me. Jamie, thank you for not talking to me like I'm an idiot. You wouldn't believe how many people try and pitch me on stuff, all right, where they think I don't know what they're doing. All right. And I always, and you're nodding your head, yes. Whenever I sell someone who's really successful, I start and preface with the praise and then transition to I am here to win your business. Not I'm not here to sell you, I am here to sell you. And then they always appreciate and respect me at the end of that conversation because there's so many people in the world that try and sell them on stuff that they're talking to them like they're making them out to be an idiot. And that is not a
Right.
positive that's not a positive psychology. Does that make sense? Like
That's
I'm
right.
just saying.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I love that approach. That's very interesting. Most people definitely would not necessarily give that advice.
Well, here's the deal. If you go into a business meeting with someone really successful that could be life changing for you, and you tell them, I am here to win your business, your whole resistance to asking for the business will diminish too. So it does you a favor. Like you don't worry and stress about asking for the business because you're telling them up front, I am here to ask for your business. And you can stutter and stumble your way through it. No one said there's only one word in sales you can't be, and that's desperate. Everything else goes. You can be nervous, you can you can be vulnerable. In fact, vulnerability has become very sexy, as I call it. All right. No
Yeah.
one wants, you would align more with someone if they share with you their journey has not gone like this. All right. But you've experienced things in life. So again, I'm just trying to throw things at your audience so that they can be like, oh, that's an interesting
Yeah.
notion. And if they
Absolutely.
can
I love
interpret,
it.
like, but if they can interpret, since you said intimate, if they can praise their partner, you have a boyfriend, Celeste, you can praise him. I promise you, like girlfriend, you can praise them. Whatever the scenario, that's what's going to make them more receptive to you and wanting to understand where you're coming from. But it's got to be genuine praise.
Yes. Yes. And yep. I hear you. I hear you. I really, really appreciate that advice. And what do you think, Jamie? Whenever people have a lot of sales conversations, they also like to talk about this whole emotion versus logic tactics, right? The use the emotions, use the logic here. What are your thoughts regarding that?
I think we all just teach something in a certain flavor. All right. Everyone in the world does things on emotions first, and then they'll justify it with logic afterwards.
That's right.
Everyone. I don't care who they are. They'll get to an emotional space to do something and then justify with logic, and they'll spend a fortune. If there's no price they won't spend based on those emotions, they'll justify with the logic. I'll make this a little bit more interesting. I'll teach a lesson that most podcasts won't ever have on it: emotion and logic. All right.
Okay.
Let's see if your audience finds this if we know that people do things on emotions and then they justify it with logic, and we know we're going to ask for a high amount of money, all right, we're a high ticket item, all right, you know, if you get someone to an emotional state, the whole point in emotional states, don't we struggle or stumble to find the words to describe how we would feel if we were to achieve XYZ success? Give you an example. You hike up a mountain. I don't hike a lot aggressively, but I hike. When you get to the top and you have the scenic view, all right, they call it the words breathtaking, right? Well, last time I checked, breathtaking means you struggle to come up with words, right? If we're in a logical state, we could say the longest words on the planet. The person in front of you will be using long words. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. You know, I didn't realize I'd be doing a Mary Poppins rendition on here, but if you want to know if you've got someone to an emotional state, if your audience wants to know they've got someone to an emotional state, the person in front of them will be stuttering, stumbling, or using short words, or maybe even cursing to describe how they feel about something. All right.
Yes.
If
So
they're
true.
using long words, it should tell them this person's still in a logical state. I give like if are you willing to be a guinea pig and volunteer for your audience to prove a point?
Let's do it.
Okay. Now you're young. You're younger than me. All right. I'm 46, but What is one thing in life that you've not achieved yet? And it could be start a family, it could be financial freedom, it could be travel somewhere, it could be anything. What is one thing, Celeste, that if you weren't
Okay.
to achieve it in life, you would be devastated you weren't to achieve it? What comes to your mind?
That's a interesting word. I would say okay, let's say have children of my own.
Wow, okay, so that's a pretty powerful one. You could have picked anything, Celeste. Why did you pick the having children?
Because I would like to use my direct influence on one or two beings that come from me that can be change makers in this world.
Okay, can you elaborate on that? Like, what kind of change? When you say change makers, like, elaborate for me. What comes to your mind? Like,
Yeah, so I think for me, this podcast is called The Light to Success. And I like to consider that I am a light in this world and I am a light to those around me because I always try to bring them up wherever they are. I make people smile. I make them see purpose where they see darkness. And it can be very silly things or it can be really deep things. And I believe in energy a lot, and sometimes you don't need to talk too much, but it's about how you make people feel. And it's people, it's the effect that people can have of you that can just transform your life, and just being those change makers. That's why I have a podcast. That's why I do so many things that I do in my life, and I want to create more beings that are like that, or I want to have an influence in helping that.
how would you feel within? Obviously, it from what I know about biology, at least take 9 months. But how would you feel? All right, if in the next couple of years, Celeste, you have a baby, you have that child that you can then pass on that legacy to, so they can be a shining light for
That would
others
be
out there.
wonderful.
How would you describe, like, how would you describe, if there was like, if there was an adjective for that baby and hold that baby in a few years, knowing that you can do that, how would that feel?
That would feel very heartwarming.
Heartwarming.
That would feel, I'm sure, very magical.
All right. So watch this. How would you feel if, because you could have said anything, how would you feel if you never had a kid?
Yeah, that could be something that happens, right? I think I would try to look for alternatives and maybe adopt, maybe give my time to children in different ways.
Right. So watch this. I'm going to share something with you, and we're going to be really raw about this. Even though I asked you what, why, how, and even though it's powerful for you, I'm still got you in a logical headspace. And the reason I know that is because you're not in tears right now. All right. And if I really wanted to get you to an emotional space, especially about having kids, I'd have to get you to an even more emotional space. But I'm not looking on the air to get you to a place of absolute tears. But you still, as an example for your audience, right? Your answer on how you'd feel if you didn't have kids shows me that, yeah, you might want kids, but you're going to be okay in life if you don't. All right. Because you've got an answer for me. If someone's selling someone and you want to know, you know what I mean, like what, why, how, if you've got someone in tears, you really know you got them to an emotional place. You even used the word heartwarming. You didn't struggle to find words to describe certain things. The only area where you stumbled and struggled was on the first question. Now, what your audience doesn't realize and what you didn't know is on that first question, I planted a seed for a particular answer that is going to give me more chance to get you to an emotional space. I said, what was one thing? Some people say have kids, start a family. Some people say travel somewhere. All right. Some people like say financial freedom. And then I said, what was one thing that you would want? And because I said about the kids part, like some people want a family, your brain went to, I'd like to have kids.
Right, right. Because it was one of
All
your
right.
examples,
Right.
right?
So we can indeed plant seeds in psychology, Celeste, to get people, but they've got to want it. Like you do want kids. I'm just sharing as an example for your audience when they watch it. There are other people, I promise you, that if you ask the same questions to that I asked you, they would be in tears about having kids, like how they would feel, like to describe that feeling. Now, to be fair to you, I didn't dig deeper on this podcast because I wasn't look. I was like, you might get into tears, but I wasn't looking to deep dive to do that. But I could have really like described to me this feeling, describe to me that feeling, and I'm asking questions where I'm getting you to elaborate. So if you want to get someone, we talk about emotions, logic. The more emotional you want to get someone, the more you've got to get them talking. And that, my new friend, is how people will feel like, oh my God, this person really cares. I'll give you, I'll
Yes.
go, I'll even deep dive into this topic. Have you ever heard of someone where they've lost someone? Like I've had a woman share with me before they lost a child. And they say that you're either part of the 99% club or the 1% club. 99% of the world is not comfortable having morbid discussions. Like someone shares they lost someone, most of the world will say things like, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then they don't know what else to really say. If
Hmm.
anyone ever shares with you, Celeste, I've lost someone, you're the best scenario you could say to that person is, I'm so sorry to hear that. Hey, since you brought that up, would you be okay? Remember we talk positive, negative connotation. Don't say, would it upset you to share? Be like, hey, would you be okay sharing what happened? And then when that person gets to talk to you, Celeste, I promise you they're going to be so happy with you because you're part of a small percent of people that actually give them the ability to tell their story. And I can promise you that is one of the most incredible questions out there that will help elevate any relationship. I
I
didn't
love
know
that.
that.
And again, using the positive connotation rather than the negative one, because the words that we're using is what we hear, even if there's a not before.
If you say, like, would it upset you? It's going to start upsetting them more likely than if you say, since you brought it up, would you be okay sharing? Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I love that, Jamie. So many great, great nuggets. I hope those listening are truly taking in these tips and you can really start implementing them because I truly think that personally, I've been working on my communication for a few years and it has completely transformed my life, my relationships, the way I connect deeply with others. And I love to embrace that, Jamie, on asking questions. I'm the queen of asking questions. That's why I have a podcast. That's what I do all the time. But I love as well, you've added so much more context and the impact that it can have. And I hope others really take that in. And Jamie, one of something that I ask all my guests that are here is, this podcast is also about redefining what success means to us and what we value in life that we want to get better at, that where we want to have our focus. So today, Jamie, what does success mean to you?
So look, the hope is we always run into people that we're growing. All right. If you ever run into someone who says they've got it all figured out, I'm going to run away from that kind of narcissistic, egotistical kind of individual that believes that story. This year alone, my fourth year into my business of figuring out what I want to be when I grow up at 42 to now being 46. I think I've learned that success for me is how can Jamie healthily challenge himself and keep growing, yet at the same time do something where it's made sustainable. So every action, I can do a podcast all day long, every day. It doesn't feel like work, it's happiness. I love it. I get to be around people like Celeste. Like it's positive. I keep doing that. Everyone in the world can do, everyone in the world can have the success they want by doing things they want to do on a daily basis. The only reason someone doesn't succeed is they quit or stop doing something. Right? If every one of your listeners compounds actions every day that they love to do, they'll find they can get success. So, for instance, I go to a gym in Orlando where I live, and now I've, as a result of just going to the gym, because I go every day, I made a contact there that got me a talk for the Miami Dolphins next year. All right.
Some.
Right. So I gave a talk in Nashville. I bump into you. Those are compounding actions. I think success is just living a life style by design and understanding, money comes. I've got look at my tonality. Money is coming to me, and it's not. I don't care about the money. I know the money's going to come. I care about what actions am I doing every day so I can enjoy my days, Celeste, and and then teach my kids. The legacy for my kids is you don't have to go out there and get a job in order to have success. All right. But you do have to be prepared to do the same actions every day without having to sell yourself on those actions every day. And you enjoy it. You make it habitual in those regards. And anyone who I've run into that's started their journey of entrepreneurship at the same time as I did, that haven't had success, the only difference between me and them is they've stopped and started. They keep stop starting. All right. And so if hopefully success, I think, is in the eyes of the beholder, Celeste. Like, I think we're all mental. Like, I can think I'm out of shape because I ate rubbish food for 4 days through Thanksgiving, but that's in my own head. All right. It's not in external to others. So I think everyone defines their way to success. For me, my success, it comes truly from being able to not have to do any work with a client till 10 a.m. All right. And doing an hour session a day, 9 months a year, knowing that June and July, I'm not going to do any work. Knowing that I run my own business, so if someone asks me, can I do something? I don't have to check in with someone to ask them, am I allowed to do it? And those are and I think as well, to be kind of cheesy, all success comes from abundance. It's giving more, knowing that, like, if I've come on this podcast and I've given someone advice and tips, they can go out there and be a better parent as a result of it and have better relationships. That to me is the win. Do you like
Absolutely.
that? People care. You said people only ever remember the way you leave them feeling. All right. I didn't at one point say, "Hey, everyone, I want clients and I want this." There's none of that. Am I surprised if anyone reaches out as a result of listening to this and be like, "I think this guy can teach me something"? No, that's not a surprise. That means that nothing happens by accident. It means I've shared something on here. Or when I was on stage, I never approach you saying, I want to be on your podcast. It's, Jamie, I really loved your talk. It really resonated. I host a podcast. Would you come on board? It's all from abundance, Celeste. So success is aligned with giving. And as a result of giving, I promise, as cheesy as it sounds, it always comes back to you.
Absolutely. I love that. Love that perspective, Jamie. And it's wonderful to hear about your journey, what you're doing in the world, and how organically this is all coming to you. I love that you seem like a free spirit as well, where you're a very authentic person and you bring that out of others as well, which is really wonderful.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it, Celeste. Thank you so much for having me. It's been
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an absolute pleasure. I will be sharing your links, your website, here in the podcast notes for anybody who wants to connect with Jamie. You absolutely should. He is so wonderful, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Jamie, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Cheers, Celeste. Appreciate you.
You have just finished listening to this episode, and I hope you're feeling inspired, enlightened, and ready to take the next step to accomplish your goals. Make sure to check out the show notes for any information shared. And if this message impacted you, please share this wisdom with at least one person you care about, and let's grow this movement across the globe. Always remember that the light to success is you, my friend. Until next time.